We've only got one action item here. I talked about mine last time with the Maslach burnout inventory. Did you take this?
I did take this, and I borderline regret taking this. I'm old school and printed it, Mike. I felt like an old man when I am the person who regularly said, well, just sign it digitally. Like, you don't need to print this and then write on it and then redigitize it. Like, I'm the person that has said this for years. And then whenever I pulled this up and saw all the stuff on it, I was like, oh, okay. And then I just hit print, went and picked it up off the printer. And when I got back to my desk, I realized, oh no, I just did that thing that I tell people not to do. I should probably stop telling them to not do it since I just did it. Anyway,
You're going to print out your emails and keep them in folders next too?
Probably. I'm going to have a filing cabinet back here. You got the red bins back there. There's going to be this great big filing cabinet right next to it before long, and that's where my email goes. I will have an assistant who prints every email that comes to me, and then I can literally throw it in the trash or file it.
No, someone used to print out emails, write on them, and say, can you get back to this person and hand me the paper?
I'm not quite that bad, though some people would rather I did that because then it would mean they would get a response from me.
Sure.
Okay, so Joe's burnout test results, burnout inventory is the technical. I know there's a few of these out there, but the one that I took has a burnout section, a depersonalization, and personal achievement sections. Is this the same one you did?
I think so.
That sounds
right.
The
terms sound a little bit different, that second one specifically, but
yeah.
Just talk us through your results. Maybe it'll make sense.
Well, basically each section has 3 different zones. You're either in low-level burnout, moderate burnout, or high-level burnout. And I did very well on all 3, as in I got high-level burnout on all 3. So that's a problem that I need to do something about, and was not. I have to admit that going into this, I was not expecting it to show that Joe was in high-level burnout territory. I was fully expecting this to be maybe moderate, low-level to moderate. That's what I was expecting. This wasn't even close. It was just way high on all of them. As in, the second one, if you got a 12 or greater on this list, you're in high-level burnout. I got a 22. Okay, that's significant. So anyway, that just tells me that I need to maybe back off a number of things, do a little, maybe one of Mike's personal retreats, take some time, that sort of thing, get some separation.
Yeah, you do.
All the things, right? I need to do some work on Joe, basically, is what I'm hearing.
All right. Well,
not fun.
You should definitely do a personal retreat. I think I've given you access to the course.
Oh, probably.
But if you're serious about it, I will hook you up if you need it. I'll hook everybody else up too. I'm going to commit right now. I'll give 50% off the personal retreat handbook to anyone who uses the coupon code Help Joe Out.
All right. Help Joe out. Go to a personal retreat for yourself as well.
That's my mission. You know how Sean McCabe has his mission to get every company in the world to take sabbaticals? My mission is to have everybody in the world take a personal retreat.
Nice. All right. Do you have a way to quantify that?
No.
Okay. Fair point. I like it. Anyway, that was all I had for follow-up. I did do it. Was not thrilled with the results. Have not shared the results of this with my wife yet. That's this afternoon's point of conversation. So I'm going to take the paper home, lay it on the table, and say, I have a problem.
What do you think is going to happen with that?
She's probably going to look at me like, yeah, I know. That's fully what I expect. So she knows me better than I know me. So she's good. She'll know. And then she'll probably know exactly what it is I need to do as a result.
Cool. So is there anything, it kind of sounds like you've got more digging to do with this, but having taken it, is there any low-hanging fruit of this is what I'm going to do starting right now, tomorrow, whatever, to try to move away from the edge, because I had somebody email me who has a lot of experience with a lot of the concepts that we talk about. He didn't say I could share the email, so I'm not going to mention who it is, but mentioned the burnout stuff specifically, like kind of warned me, hey, be careful. Sounds like you're real close to an edge.
Yeah.
If your scores are all high, I would argue you're probably close to the same edge. So I wouldn't put off doing what you can do about it. Obviously, it doesn't mean you have to completely change your lifestyle, quit your job, all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I know there's the easy one is I know that I need to back off of the number of hours of work I put in a week. Like that one I know. I'm regularly told I work too much. And part of that's because I really love what I do, but at the same time, like I do it so much that it becomes a problem and becomes a strain. So yes. Some of that might actually be, and again, I'm very, like, this is hot takes, right? Some of that might just be workload. And because it's a church and because it's like my arena, it feels like there's this thing that I want to have done and I'm the one who can do it and there's not anyone else who can do it. Like that's the mentality that comes with it. So then I will run ragged trying to get that thing done because it's something I believe in, instead of realizing that I maybe need to back off a bit and get some help. Like that might actually be the real answer. But again, that's a hot take. And that just because I say that doesn't necessarily mean that it's an easy thing for me to go just get help. So
yep. Understood.
that's the way it is. So I got to do some more deep diving on it, ask some questions. I at least have some numbers and some technical now that I can have a conversation with a couple different people about it. So start with a conversation with Becky, and then depending on the obvious things that I'm overlooking that she can see very plainly, I will then embark on a conversation with my boss and move from there. So
all right.
It's probably the right path at this point.
Good luck.
Thanks. Here's hoping it goes well. I don't know why I wouldn't. Being able to have the conversation is half the battle, it seems like.
Yep. Agreed. Well, since that's the only action item, I guess it's time to talk about today's book, which is The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And this is an interesting one. It's thick. If you count the number of pages, you probably got worried when you cracked it open because it's like 400 something, but it is very similar, I would say, in style to, was it The Practice by Seth Godin that we read with all the really short little chapters?
That sounds right, yeah.
I think that was the one. And this one actually goes a little bit quicker because they all tend to start on the right-hand side of the page.
Yes.
So there's a lot of blank space in this one. And I kind of like that. You can kind of pick through and read little snippets wherever you want. It's one of those books that's easy to kind of just open to a random page and get something from it. There are no sections with this book. Just I counted 78 chapters.
You didn't even number them, which is kind of frustrating to me. Like I always want to know how many there are. Come on, tell me. I want to know, please.
Right. We're not going to obviously cover all of those or list them all. I'm going to grab a small sampling of the ones that kind of spoke to me and then start the conversation, go from there, I guess. Before we get into the specifics of it, though, what was your first impression of the material of this book? When you picked up this book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being, what was your initial mental state going into it? And I say that as people who make stuff for the internet, so we probably tend to skew more towards the people who consider themselves creative versus those who don't. But I feel like the mindset you go into it with is kind of important. So where were you when you first started this one?
I'd seen this book. This book is one of those that's been making the rounds in our circles. Like I've seen it posted about and mentioned and screenshots and all sorts of stuff. I guess not a screenshot, but pictures of this book in a variety of places. For a while, and by a while I mean for about a month and a half or so. I suppose it just came out first of the year, so somewhere around second week of the year on. And the snippets that I've seen of it, and then seeing the title. This is all preconceived expectations prior to even receiving the book, so there was no way for me to actually look at it and see my viewpoint on it at this point. But with all of that as the background, I kind of had it in my head that it's similar to Walden Pond, like the oh shoot, I just drew a blank on the author's name. That is bad. That's real bad. Okay, Walden Pond. Somebody in the chat look it up for me. Walden Pond is a story, whatever this author's name is, basically is like explaining like noticing and viewing things and living life and what it's like to live life as a creative in nature. And like he builds his own log cabin and it's overlooking Walden Pond. And it's one that like that concept it's about his journey of being in like learning how to be in the present moment. There you go, Thoreau. And it's about Thoreau's journey of learning to be in that cabin and just experience things around that cabin. That's what I kind of had in my head. And I'm aware that that's not really a true correlation because Thoreau's not talking about creative endeavors. He's just talking about noticing frogs on a pond, like that type of thing, and learning how to be in the moment and noticing how conversations happen when people walk by and all those things. So he's just learning to be present with that. Now, there's a lot more to it. I'm dumbing that way down. That was kind of what I was expecting out of this book. So, like, that's the preconceived notion that I had before I really dove into this. So, I don't know how those two books would compare in a technical stance. They're worlds apart as far as, like, what they're talking about. But that was kind of where I was starting from on this one.
Sure. Cool. Well, let's jump into the actual material here. I want to start the first section that I want to talk about is actually the third chapter, I guess, the source of creativity. But I do want to back up just a little bit before that because the first chapter here is everyone is a creator. And I feel like this is a very strong opening to the book and obviously a theme that I wholeheartedly believe in. But at the very beginning, he's laying the foundation that everyone is creative. Creativity is not a rare ability. He defines it for us, is to bring something into existence that wasn't there before. And also what you make doesn't have to be witnessed or recorded. So you don't have to share it with the entire world in order to be a creator. Now, that's important because I feel like you have to have that foundation that you have the ability to create, regardless of what you do for a living, whether you've ever written, published, made anything, shared it publicly. The next thing then, the third chapter, I guess, I just numbered these in my MindNode file, so I have numbers with these, and I'll share those as I go here, but that's not actually what the number is. Possible I misnumbered them or something, but.
Okay, so don't trust Mike's numbers. We don't know if he can count or
They
not.
are rough estimates of where these things are in the book.
Okay. All right. This is why I use page numbers.
I could use page numbers. I have those for quotes, but not for the chapters. I don't think
anytime I've
important.
got like a note, so how to read a book 101. So this is maybe 201. I don't know what it is. But whenever I have a note about a book that I put, whether it's a digital or paper, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's just a thought that's disconnected and it goes to a different chapter. Whatever page I'm on right now, when that thing goes into the book notes, that's the page number I write down. Because whatever's on that page is what triggered the connection that I'm wanting to write down. Whether it's a direct quote or whether it's that specific comments on that page, it doesn't matter. But that's the page that triggered that thought.
Gotcha. Interesting.
I'm weird.
Well, everyone's got their own approach.
No, this is the right way to do it.
Okay.
It's not an approach. This is a fact. This is the perfect way to take the note.
Well, I will tell you that my way of taking notes is probably not the right way for a lot of people because it's pretty crazy, but it works for me.
I mean, just look at your MindNode files. Like that's pretty. Like, I I love looking at your MindNote files. Like, I could not take notes like that, and I'm aware of it. There's no way. It would drive me bonkers.
Yeah, that's fair. So all that to say, number 3 on my node is the source of creativity, and this is the point where he starts to talk about how the stuff that you make things from is all around us, but the brain takes that stuff and then spins it to make you think like it is coming from within you. And I like that picture. I feel like that is very much in line with my thinking and understanding of the whole creative process that I've talked about with like the 5 C's of creativity, where you capture things that have your attention out in the world, like from the books that we read. You curate those, put them in your system, and then I've got a thing where I cultivate them and I see what is actually there. Then I connect them with other ideas. It's the whole idea of syntopical reading, going back to how to read a book. And then ultimately there is an expression where you create something. And this is kind of priming the pump for that. This is talking about how you take things that are around you, and even if you don't understand the process that happens, you bring them in and then you put them back out. Basically, it's like breathing. There's a inhalation and exhalation. And I am able to see how this applies to the way that I create. Curious what you think about this idea.
Well done asking this question, because this is like the starting point of where I started to connect that this was going to be a book that was like high level, look at this whole thing from a third person view. And that's kind of how the book's written, like looking at this from an external perspective, which is probably the correct way to do this style. So he's not wrong in that. Rick Rubin's not wrong in that style choice. It's just a viewpoint that I was not quite prepared for coming into it, because like we think about all the books that we've read recently. Like they've got a 3-part layout. They've got maybe 10, 12 chapters. They've got a bunch of stories. They have a cadence to, tell me a story, tell me about the story, what should I do with it? Tell me a story, tell me about the story, tell me what I should do with it. Like they have that cadence that walks you through the whole thing. This is worlds apart from that. There are not that many stories in this, and there are very high level viewpoints of the whole thing. And this is exactly that in full form, because it's showing like the outsider's view, like outside component view of what's going on with creativity. Like you're having these external inputs, and then it makes us think that things are coming from inside of us, but it's really not, but it's how it feels. But again, that's like something removed looking at it. And it was at this point in the book, it's like, okay, I feel like in order for me to embrace his thought process for the rest of this book, I kind of have to take on this mentality. The question is, do I trust that mentality and that foundation that we're setting on, right? Because then, like, the rest of the book is dependent on this.
It's true.
Because that's the foundation of what he's going to give us through the rest of the book. So the source of creativity being kind of outside of us versus inside of us, I think it's really hard to say where that's truly coming from, because I think it's so interconnected between those two, which I think he would completely agree with. Like it's my previous experiences connecting with the new experiences, which are then creating this new, seemingly new idea, or seed, as he'll refer to it, which we'll talk about later. And I think that makes sense. I don't think I have arguments with that. I think I'm on board, primarily because I know that like so much of creativity is externally dependent, and yet it's also dependent on my previous experiences, which come from both internal and external viewpoints. So I think it's spot on. It's just a little bit of a roundabout way of getting my head there, which I think is a lot of this book. Like there was a lot of times I was like reading this, like, okay, hold on a minute. Let me reread that section, because race car brain jumped ahead and I'm not real sure what he's talking about. So I had to slow down a lot on this one.
Yeah, you can't read this like you read most of the books that we cover for bookworm, there's no Blinkist version of the message here. There's just a whole bunch of little anecdotes which could serve as inspiration and really change your mindset around how creativity works. For example, I mean, this is kind of supporting material here in chapter 2, where it's titled Tuning In. Basic idea here is that we've got these antenna for creative thought, and we develop this sensitivity for creative signal. That's kind of the capture phase of my creativity flywheel. But he says that in chapter 2, if you have an idea and you don't do something with it, it's going to find its voice through another maker, right? The signal is out there. You just have to connect with it, and then you have to express it. And chapter 4 is also very much in alignment with this awareness, right? With awareness, the program is happening around us, and we just observe it. So it's not a state that you force. And while you can't change what you're noticing, you can change your ability to notice. He talks about how the universe is only as large as our perception of it. There's lots of really profound stuff in here if you take it in isolation. And I'm trying to like condense it into some bigger ideas for the sake of the outline. But all of that is, like you said, foundational. I think the next place I want to go is the 5th chapter, the vessel and the filter. And I know I said we weren't going to cover all of them, and I've so far mentioned every single one. I'm not going to do that for the rest of the book, I promise. These are just, like I said, really foundational. You have to buy into this idea, or otherwise at this point, you're probably getting ready to put the book down. That was not the approach that I had. He is speaking my language. But number 5 talks about how each of us has a container that is constantly being filled with data. And I thought of with this, all the stuff that we've read by Chris Bailey over the years. And the one visual in particular from Hyperfocus, where he talks about the quality of the information that you collect. And there's like that X and Y graph, and it actually, I guess it goes the other way. I'm trying to do this visually on a reverse camera. It's not working. But you invest time in these things that are entertaining, but they maybe aren't helpful to you. I don't know. When I think about that, and because I remember reading that and thinking, or being challenged to improve the quality of the dots that I was collecting and try to get stuff that was going to give me some future value, not just stuff that I enjoyed. And that's a big reason why I think I enjoy reading nonfiction books, and that seems really weird to people. I've just developed a taste for that over the years, and I do actually honestly prefer to read nonfiction. And there's so many nonfiction books I want to read that when someone's like, hey, you should read fiction, I understand there's value to be gained from it. I could learn how to tell better stories, all that kind of stuff. But just kind of like, nah, this looks better. Right? So I guess what I'm trying to articulate here is that picture that Chris implanted in my brain of like the quality of the dots, right? That's what I view reading nonfiction books. Like that's quality dots. And there are quality dots to be found other places. But I think the main idea is consider the quality of the dots, right? And then allow those things into your vessel. When I get this picture of a vessel, I get a picture of like a bucket that you're carrying around, and it's only got so much capacity. It doesn't matter if it's a tiny little bucket or if it's a 5-gallon bucket or it's one of those great big garbage cans. Like there is a point where nothing else fits in there. And that's really the thing with the visual for me, is putting the things in there that are worthwhile, because there's too much stuff out there to try to collect it all. Right? So information is being filtered as we put it into our vessel. And then when we synthesize that and connect dots in new ways and express something, even if it's just a remix of some things that we have heard other places, by sharing it, we can become then source material for somebody else. And that can be something that they use to fill their vessel. And so it's kind of this perpetuating positive cycle if you can get over the fear associated with actually sharing what you're making, because there's lots of things that will try to tell you that other people are better than you are, and they have more expertise and they know more than you do. So who are you to share anything? You should just let them share stuff. And I feel like that's the real message at the beginning of this book is no, you've got something to share and you need to share it. And the way to do that is to be aware of how the cycle works and then to lean into that and
this
not be
concept
fighting
of the
against it.
vessel and the filter, the vessel piece maybe more so than the filter. Filter, in my head, the filter is merely a selection of quality inputs, like what you're saying. The vessel piece, though, it's interesting because you can start to see it not just as a single vessel, but as multiple. And if you go that route, and like using the example that he has with relationships, if you're in, if you're married, then the vessel of someone filling the role of spouse is full. So you can't fill that vessel. So that one's already full. Now, if you go into the creative space, like some people have only so much capacity for writing or writing endeavors. Like they can only handle so many of those at a time. You can maybe handle a newsletter, maybe a book, and maybe a blog, but those three on top of each other are starting to be a lot. And then your vessel of writing is now full. Taking on another writing project is not going to happen until you drop one of those others or complete one of them. So you start to like add all that up in different arenas. Like, okay, you've got these different vessels, these different areas, and you're going to be collecting inputs or taking on projects inside of those. And if you want to collect more, you need to empty of some in order to make room for it, assuming it's full. Like you hear, this is similar to whenever people talk about they just finished a big project and then they had to take on a new hobby or they had to take on some other, thing that they're going to do just because like all of a sudden they've got a ton of creative energy that they're used to expelling every single day and they got nothing. Now we got to come up with something, some place to let that energy go. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy because I got all this pent up energy I don't know what to do with. Like that's essentially what we're talking about. So it's an interesting concept, and I know we've kind of talked about it in different ways. But again, this is just a different way of seeing a similar concept that we've discussed in the past.
I took it a little bit different. I think a different perspective of this. I wasn't viewing it as like the things that I would be doing in terms of creating, although there's a lot of truth to that too. You only have so much time and you got to pick and choose what your activities are going to be. But I was viewing this more as like the information that comes into your, I don't know, I need a better analogy for this because it's really the stuff that you choose to pay attention to. The information is around you all the time, right? Thinking back to Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray, where there's all those billions of bits of information that are around us, and we've got a tiny little record needle of focused attention on anything that's happening around us at any given moment. So we got to pick and choose what we're going to allow in, basically. But then the fascinating part to me, I think, is like as long as you focus on not keeping it in, as long as there is an outlet or an output associated with the inflow of the information, I kind of don't really care how it gets expressed. It's just you do have to be looking for that release. There has to be an output associated with it. Otherwise, I feel it gets overwhelming because my brain anyways tends to try to hang on to all that stuff and organize it. And I'm going to need this at some point because I haven't done anything with it yet. Right? The fact that I express it, whether it's verbally as we record a podcast or I write it down somewhere, doesn't really matter. I have to let it go though before I can move on to the next thing. And I think it probably requires some consistent creation for you to be able to trust the process like that, maybe. And I'm at that point now where I have my rhythms. We're going to talk about that actually a little bit later. But if you don't have that, it can be a little bit tricky maybe to to figure that out. I could see that.
I was just glancing over this blog post in a book. It's about 2 pages long, and as I was like glancing through some of like the main points in these 2 pages, like right now I'm realizing like this is actually, I don't want to say vague, but it's like artistically left not detailed, I guess would be the term for it. Because like the way I took this, as I explained before you just reiterated,
Sure.
seems to follow very much in line with what he's saying. But what you're saying also does, even though those aren't necessarily the same thing. Like, it makes me wonder if there's a lot of this that could be taken a handful of ways, depending on where your current situation is. Like, people talk about that with like paintings, like depending on what season of life you're in, if you take enough time to sit and look at a painting, you will see it completely different depending on the season of life that you're in. And that you're like your previous experiences will dictate your viewpoint of that painting. I wonder if this is similar to that. Like, what you're going through right now may dictate the way that you interpret this book. It's not a bad thing. It just means it's well set up for rereading in the future. But that is not the way I took it, Mike. But hey, go for it.
All right. Well, let's go to the next section because I feel like this actually applies to the discussion that we are having right now. So the next chapter that I want to talk about is 17, Make It Up. And in that chapter, he talks about how there is a difference between doubting your work and doubting yourself. All right. So I think maybe what you are describing in terms of what are the projects that I'm going to do, if you're wrestling with that question of there needs to be a way to output this, but I have no idea where it is. I think at the beginning phases of that anyways, that could be the doubting yourself part where it's, I don't know if I'm good enough. And I've been in that place before where that is the thing that holds you back. But the other side of that, doubting your work, is I don't know if this is good enough. That is a totally different conversation though. Because then it's if this thing isn't good enough, then I can just chuck it. And I know that since I am good enough, I will make something again that will be better than this. I think there's a tendency to, if you don't have a bunch of creative projects, if you don't have a bunch of outlets, if you don't have a track record of creating, you can get so attached to this one thing, and this just has to be amazing. And I think I have been through that with the first time that I launched the faith-based productivity video course, because I had just been let go by Asian Efficiency, and I was trying to find my next new thing, and I had this one idea, right? And I'm like, this is the thing that's going to change my world. And it did, but not in the way that I envisioned it would. It wasn't a huge commercial success at the beginning. Well, like that's what I had anchored on. And so when I didn't sell a ton of copies of that course, I remember having like the identity crisis, like, well, what the heck? I thought I was supposed to do this thing. Nobody cares. And I had that question, like, I don't know if I'm good enough. But I think at this point I've been doing enough other things that I don't struggle with that anymore. And I think that's really the only way to get to that point, is to do it consistently enough to silence the voice of the inner critic. You'll never silence the voices of the external critics, but the internal one is the one
it's
that
a bit of a danger
yells
to
at me the loudest anyways.
start to associate the work itself as you, like that whole identify with the work, so much so that your identity is tied up in it. It's easy to say that, but it's very difficult to do that in practice for many, many people. Like that's not simple. It's great if you can, but even people who have done it for a very long time will fall into that hole once in a while. So if that's you, because I know that's me, it's not a simple thing. So I need to say that to begin with. Also, it's a simple change in how you term something. Like the way that he put it was, this song isn't good enough yet versus I cannot write a good song. Like completely different, worlds apart in those two phrases, depending on which one you're saying to yourself. And the trouble is, at least for me, is I find that I'm typically saying one of those two things without realizing, like it's a subconscious comment to myself, like, oh, you're terrible at this. Like, and it's such a brief comment that it just doesn't even strike me as something that needs to be corrected. It's just a thing that happens. Like, okay, that's not true. This is where, like, I'd a couple two episodes ago, I had the action item of doing the journaling at night thing, right? I did that, and last time I was saying I was going to continue doing that, which I have been. That process is also one that can come in and be extremely helpful whenever it comes to things like this, because you can start to disconnect from the specific action. It's like, okay, did this go well or didn't it? And is it done? Like, you can start to ask those questions, which I've done on a couple things. I've got a pretty major project I'm in the middle of at work, and it's one I'm pretty excited about, so it's hard for me to let it be. But it's one that I know that it's never really done. It involves a sound system. So, like, you're never actually done fixing and tweaking with sound systems. It's just a perpetual forever thing. So the question is, when are you done? When do you call that project done? And you have to make that decision. Well, if someone has an opinion of it, whether it's my opinion or somebody else's, doesn't really matter. Like, this is where the self-doubt versus the doubt of the project itself can start to manifest itself. So, yeah, I struggle with this one. But I'm not real sure what to do about it either. It's just an awareness thing.
Sure. You mentioned self-doubt. That's actually the previous chapter, 16. And one of the things I jotted down from that chapter is that you are the only one with your voice. And if you really believe that, that can be enough to get you over that hump and actually release the thing. And then the other thing that's kind of tied to this is that you also have to believe that there will be other ideas that will come to you, even if you don't know exactly what they are yet. You have to trust that you are aware enough of the creative system that's happening around you that you can grab some new inspiration and make something else, which I get it. That can be scary. It's almost like you got to let it go. And then the minute that you let it go, that's when you see the next thing that you can leap to, which maybe that's a spot to go to the next one here, which is on habits. And there's actually two parts of this that I want to talk about: habits and seeds. So habits is chapter 27, and then the one after that, chapter 28, is seeds. But as it pertains to habits, I feel like this is important because this is the thing that helps the creative process work. It's the showing up consistently. And these are ideas that we have heard a million times before, but again, couple this with the seeds idea, right? So if you are focused on habits and not on goals, then the only person you really compete against is yourself. And for both the artist and the athlete, he mentions that the details matter. So you have to practice the right way. And he talks about how discipline and freedom are not opposites. We've heard that before as well. Okay, so then if you have habits, that's the process that actually produces the creation. But what are you actually producing? And he has a word for that whole process. He calls it crafting, which I actually really like. I've got different words for it, but essentially it's the same idea. You have something which is not developed, and then you hone it, and then you release it into the world. So chapter 28 then is seeds, and he talks about how you don't compare your seeds. You don't judge this one being better than the other ones, and I'm going to get rid of the other ones. You just gather them. He says that on page 144, the artist's work is to collect seeds, plant them, water them with attention, and see if they take root. Can't judge a seed at the beginning. And this reminded me of the PKM workshop that I've done a couple different times now. I actually have a slide in there about how like your personal knowledge management system, and it's not an app, it's a system. It's a whole bunch of things that are tied together, that it's a greenhouse for your ideas, and you have to collect your ideas. You have to put them in there, and you have no idea what they are at the beginning. So this imagery obviously really resonated with me. It kind of helped me understand that analogy that I had kind of stumbled upon in a little bit different light. All I got to do is grab seeds, put them in the greenhouse, give them the right conditions, and then whatever pops up, that's cool. I don't have to worry about, oh, I didn't get, this particular thing this time. And that is actually very freeing.
Yeah, I have all sorts of thoughts on this. Number one, of course, we have a habits section. We're not going to skip over that particular part in the book. Two, mentioning seeds. Like whenever I was reading this, like, yep, Mike's about to bring up PKMs. Like immediately, as soon as I saw, like, they're all equal. It's like, yep, here we go.
Well, okay. So hold on a second. I got to defend myself here because I did ask, are there any specific things that you wanted to pull out? And the reason I asked that is because I knew that because there are 79 different chapters in here or whatever, if you're going to try to connect some of them, everybody is going to have a different path, right? And that's part of the beauty of this book is you'll start with one and then you'll jump to something and you'll jump to something else. So yes, you know me well. Habits and seeds are going to be things that I will jump to.
PKM is a habit. So the section on habits, it starts with the story. We've heard this before of John Wooden with the story of how to tie your shoes, how to put on your socks for his basketball teams. And the other side of that, and something you have mentioned a couple times now in this episode, is like the concept of focus on your own thing and try not to get caught up in what other people are saying. Like, I know that John Wooden had some of that mindset, if not entirely. I'm trying to remember some of the stories there, but I also know that I've recently seen there was an interview with Tom Brady, and they had asked him about one of his opponents. I don't remember the specifics. I just remember them asking, is like, did you see the tape of this guy doing this and see the stats around it? He's like, no, I was busy training. Like, no, like he doesn't know. Like, he's not 100% focused on what the other team's doing. He's focused on his own thing. And like that concept is one that I think is super important, which is why this section on habits is so, I think, important, and probably why we continue to rail on it. Every time this is even remotely mentioned, we'll bring up the concept of habits, because having these little components of your day, of your process, that are inwardly focused, not focused on how does this compare to other people, but like focusing on your own thing, that's where all the magic and goodies come from. And that's where the success can come from. And there's even a whole thing on defining that a little bit later, which is basically define it for yourself. But doing that means that you're able to develop and have, I guess, peace of mind with your own art. Define art for yourself. Like, that can be a whole bunch of different ways, whether it's code or painting. And if you're comfortable with it and you're happy with it, that's the part that matters. And then you can find an audience for that if that's what you want to do. Which I think we would both encourage you to share these things, not just hold them up in some random file system somewhere. But I think there is a lot of value in this whole habits thing. The seeds thing, of course, is very similar to that. Collecting ideas, collecting dots, as we've called it in the past. But externalizing that can have lots of benefits, as I'm sure you would attest to. But these are both topics, and there's probably a reason they're back to back. It's like, okay, build up the habits of collecting these seeds and then nurture those seeds, and they'll grow into some cool things later on. So, yes, these are awesome. Probably some of my favorite parts of the book.
And it's worth calling out, even if you have followed along since episode 1 and heard us talk about these things before, because consider the source here. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Rick Rubin.
Not.
But he is a producer. And he has won, looks like 9 different Grammy Awards over the course of 25 years from 1996 to 2021.
That explains all of like the actor musician references. Like he's got a lot of those.
Yeah, he was one of the guys who founded Def Jam Recordings or something way back in the day. But he's been doing this forever. And the way that he's been successful is exactly this. His goal was not, I'm going to win a Grammy someday, right? He just made stuff over and over and over again. And that's actually one of the cool things about this book is he shares lots of examples. And if you're not into music, there are other examples that he shares, other stories and things like that. But he'll talk about people that he was working with and the song just wasn't working. So they just completely flipped it around, did something different, right? And that is a form of experimentation or something like that. But the point being here that he practices what he preaches. And what he's telling us here is, as a multiple Grammy award winning producer, I can tell you the way that I got to this point was I consistently made stuff and I consistently developed seeds, right? And then that has a lot more credence, I feel. Not that James Clear in Atomic Habits is a flash in the pan, but almost when you compare it to Rick Rubin and everything that he's done. I mean, I know James Clear's story, so he's been writing about habits for a really long time, and Atomic Habits was not the all of a sudden, he blew up sort of success story that people will paint that stuff out to be. But I actually think this is great because if you do this, it's almost like you don't have to worry about the results, but it's a longer time scale than we typically think of success too. Rick Rubin's been doing this for decades. We want to give up after a week. You got to stick with it.
That kind of ties in what you're saying right there. It ties into, is it Cal Newport that talks about slow productivity? It seems like he's trying to write a book on this, but it's like that concept of, do the work daily towards a big thing long term. Like that's really what you're talking about. Cool concept. Definitely requires some perseverance and discipline.
Yep. Easier said than done for sure.
By far, yes.
All right. The next one that I want to talk about is number 36, the abundance mindset. And the reason I want to talk about this one is you don't get this from the title, but there's a dichotomy here that is very important to understand. And again, recognize who Rick Rubin is and the success that he's had changes this message a little bit, right? So the abundance mindset, he talks about how an artist is free to be released, to release ideas because of faith that more will arise, right? So you put a song out there, even if you could continue to tweak it and make it perfect, although nothing is ever going to be perfect, because you have to create room for the next thing. And scarcity is, well, I've got this one and this is the only one that I'm going to get. I'm not sure when the next thing is going to come, so I better protect this, at all costs. And that is counterproductive. He talks about how scarcity actually leads to stagnation. And we've talked about abundance versus scarcity in terms of overall success. Somebody else did something, wrote something on a topic that I was going to write about, and I guess I better not do that anymore. No, go ahead and make your thing, because just because they were successful with something doesn't mean there's no room for you to be successful as well. In fact, the opposite is probably true. It's validation that your idea is a good one. So the market is big enough to support both of you. Go ahead and do it. And he talks about how whatever we concentrate on, we get. That's a pretty powerful idea. And this is like what I love about this book. There's all these one-liners kind of that if you really sit and think about it, you're like, whoa, that is profound. So if I am concentrating on scarcity, I will get scarcity, right? Not just a scarcity mindset, but I really do believe if you have a scarcity mindset, it's always going to be a struggle. You're never going to be able to really tap into the flow of the energy that's around you, because your thinking is too small. You don't have the capacity to really latch onto that. But if you are able to release things and you have this abundance mindset, you can just jump in, go wherever the wind and the waves will take you, right? And that's how you get some cool places, because you can never see the other side when you have to make that leap. You just have to trust that there's enough there to sustain you. And when it comes to creativity, I mean, if you don't get this, you'll still be stuck on that first thing forever. And I feel like I was at that point with the book. Even though I self-published that book within 8 months, it was done being written after about 3. And I just continued to tweak it because I wanted it to be perfect. And I'm like, oh, that's the thing. That's my thing. You know, my one chance. Right. And I still get sucked into that sometimes. I think, I forget who it was attending a live recording. Maybe it was Carol who encouraged me to, let that one go. Cause I was talking about, I got to go back and I got to revise that. I got to update it. My thinking's evolved. Like, no, just go write the next one.
Yep. Just move on. It's okay.
Yep. Have the abundance mindset, right? That's your thinking at a specific moment in time, which he talks about that in this book too. And that's a really great section, but I didn't actually jot anything down about that. There's so much. I mean, we could have a 12-hour conversation about everything that's in this book, and it's all really, really good. But yeah, have an abundance mindset. Don't be stingy.
Yeah, that's one that we've certainly brought this one up before. This is not a new, like, the abundance mindset is not a new one. At the same time, trying to convey the difference between, trying to share ideas freely as opposed to holding on to them and assuming like this is the only one, this is the best one, you can never have it, it's mine. That's true, but at the same time, like there is the market side of it too, right? Patents exist for a reason because you're trying to prevent people from stealing things. So there is that out there as well that I was trying to process, me having a little bit of the legal mind going into that. Wait a second. Yeah, that's fine. You can share those things, but have a contract in place before you do that. Like that's that's where my brain went. Like, even Rick Rubin, he's not going to take a song that he's completely written and just give it to somebody. He's not going to have that
True,
happen.
But I can tell you he's also not like scanning the airwaves for somebody who ripped off a melody line.
Correct.
Right? Because I've seen that with people close to me where it just consumes them. It's like, oh, well, these people are stealing my stuff. So make something better.
It's a compliment. Yep. That's I think you're absolutely spot on. So I think that there's also the difference between like, this is a thing I made versus someone took this before it's completely made, or like you're trying to hold on to it versus freely offering it. Like there's a difference between stealing and then being given something. So there's that out there. But regardless, the concept of holding on to ideas because you don't want somebody else to get the idea is just complete nonsense. Like that's not the way it works. If you're willing to share that idea, very likely the person's got another comment about it, can help expand it, very likely make it better, assuming you're asking the right person. So it's okay. Don't lock down. Be open.
Yeah, and the chapter before that is on completion. And so I feel like the context or the bias towards this is just in terms of abundance versus scarcity in terms of the ideas. But I also think he would agree with like the general concept that we're talking about here. I mentioned he's won a bunch of different Grammys. There's only a certain amount of Grammys, right? So if you wanted to anchor something as evidence for a scarcity mindset, that would be something like that would be it. But I have a feeling just based on everything that we've read in this book, he would even say, so I've won a Grammy. That doesn't prevent somebody else from winning it. You have to do something that's worth winning that award. And if you don't get that award, that doesn't mean that the thing that you made is not valuable. the real value is in the creative process and you being willing to share it. And in that completion chapter, he talks about how each work of art isn't a reflection of us. It's only a reflection of who we are in this moment. And so this is where I feel like if you go into this with a growth mindset, you're cooking with gas. It's just a matter of time. I make something, it's bad. Who cares? I'm going to learn a lesson from it and I'm going to do it better next time. And I'm going to do that enough. The score is going to take care of itself, right? There is always going to be a market for things that are of high quality. And the thing I have to overcome is the constantly tweaking it and getting it just right. Because why? Because I want to meet somebody else's standard? No, he talks about how the work is done when you think it is. When you believe the work before you is the single piece that will forever define you, it's difficult to let it go, he says on page 195. And so that's the trap for me, that perfectionism. If I get stuck there, then I don't make anything new.
You should keep making new things.
How about a podcast every 2 weeks?
Hey, there we go. You can't get too caught up on each one of them because you got another one coming.
It's true. And I have never gone back and listened to the early episodes, but I'm sure if I did, I would see that we are a lot better at it now than we were.
I have the amount of interest I have in going back to those early episodes and listening to them is definitely in the negatives. Like,
yep.
It's truly something I'm avoiding.
Yep.
Like, do not want to do.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be a whole lot of value in that, to be honest, but that's okay. All right, the next one, we're going to jump ahead a bit here. But again, there's lots of great stuff in here. So 55, the name of this chapter is 24/7, or Staying in It. Creativity is something that you are. And it talks about how the artist's job is two kinds of work: the work of doing and the work of being. I like this analogy. And I think this complements probably what you and I do fairly well. When you are a full-time creator, I feel like there is pressure to constantly be creating, but you need time to switch modes and just noodle on things, right? So that's what I would call the work of being. And because the day job is so different, it actually, I feel, kind of facilitates this. I was kind of curious where you see the lines here between the work of doing and the work of being for yourself.
Yeah, it's a blurry line, but at the same time, a very clean line in that, like, it floats from thing to thing. So there's the creative side and the creative endeavors, the content creation side of it, where we're creating this podcast, right? And we're doing it every 2 weeks. I'm always reading and then processing my thoughts on it, knowing that we're going to come discuss it. So, for example, I've been reading this book. This has absorbed like all of my reading time because it's long. And then the next day, I'm regularly like processing, or that day, if I've read it in the morning, I'm processing the things that I read for this conversation. And in one particular case, I've got an audio rack sitting right here behind me that I'm in the middle of building, and it required a fair amount of soldering. So I've been soldering XLR cables, if you want to know. And that takes a lot of time. It's just a process I need to go through. Nothing specifically difficult about it in the scheme of what I do. So it was a pretty mundane thing. So I was doing something, like in that case, I would be sitting in the realm of being. It was like my day job stuff. But I've soldered XLR cables enough to not really have to think about it. It's like one of those things I can zone out on, which then means like I'm processing what I read that day. So then that's like the whole being aspect, right? I'm not actually creating anything. I don't have the habit of creating it in action at that time. This is similar, like people talk about, like I do this whenever I'm mowing the lawn. Like I could hire that out, but I want that time spent just not thinking about anything in particular, just letting my mind run, because that's where a lot of great ideas come. I just did this yesterday on the snowplow, like just back and forth, because Snowmageddon. And that is a time that seems to be wasted, and a lot of people would say I should outsource that, but I'm not going to do that because that's a very valuable being state for me versus the work of doing like we're doing right now, the work of creating the podcast. Like this is the culmination of, for me, many hours of time spent reading the text and then processing my thoughts about it, doing other stuff that I do throughout the day. Now, thankfully, like my job has a lot of places where it's stuff I do all the time. I love doing it, but I don't have to think actively about it. It's not like I'm running the soundboard in a way that requires me to like actively focus on it. It's like soldering, pulling cable, connecting things. Like I don't have to think when I do those things. I still like doing it, but I don't have to think, which means that my brain goes to the other places, that being state. So I like those two. I like that he defined them in those ways. I can't say that's like revolutionary. This is a brand new idea. Like that's definitely something I've had delineated in my mind for quite some time. But at the same time, it's like it's kind of cool to see it termed that way. So definitely a section that's worth your reading.
Well, the term being, I think, is the one that is a little uncomfortable for people, because when you are being with the idea, you're in the presence of it. It has your attention even maybe, but you're not actively moving it forward. You're not making something with it. And that, coupled with the idea I mentioned earlier, we've got a limited amount of attention to devote to things. I feel like if you're just being with an idea and you're just like holding it lightly and looking at it, there's like there can be that anxiety or that pressure to, nothing's happening here. Let's go find something else.
Yep.
And what he's encouraging us to do, I feel, is fight against that and just be in the moment with the thing. And that's kind of contradictory, I think, to some of the other stuff that I was talking about. Or it can appear that way. I really don't think it is. If I'm working on something, I want to be working on that thing. If I'm reading a book, I want to be reading one book. I know that there are people who say you should read multiple books at a time. And I've even tried that as an action item. It hasn't worked for me. I'm okay with working on one thing at a time. I'm okay when I feel like I'm at an impasse, putting that thing on the side and not actually shipping anything with that, and then moving on to the next thing. But I'm also okay just letting whatever it is that's in front of me be the thing that's in front of me for a period of time as well. And that is not easy to do, especially if you're looking for some sort of movement. The whole idea of like the seeds, right? You can't really tell that it's growing until it pokes through the ground, but there's a lot going on underneath the surface. And I feel like that's kind of hard to do. It's a skill that you can develop. It's just kind of an intuition of like, no, there's something here and I just got to incubate it a bit yet, as opposed to like, this one's done and it's time to chuck it and move on.
Yeah. This is something, it can work on a very short time frame too. At least this is the way I see it. Like there's regularly problems with computers and stuff that I need to solve in my day job. And if I don't know the answer right away, it's very common for me to just stand, not say anything, and just kind of look at it. Like I'm not doing anything. I'm just staring at it. And that frustrates some people. Like, shouldn't you be doing something? Like, and sometimes it can be frustrating to me too. Like I feel like I should be doing something and I don't know what it is. If I don't know what it is, the best thing I can do is not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment I start doing something, I'm likely going to be making it worse. And that is the opposite of what I want to be doing. So sitting and just kind of processing it. And then if it's a tough one that I can't get a solution to, I'm better off going and doing something else and then coming back to it. And I do that on occasion too. It's like, I don't know the answer to this. Give me a little bit and I'll be back. And I'll either come up with a solution that we can do temporarily or a workaround. But I need a little bit of space here. And generally people are okay with that. Like by the end of the day, I'll be back over here. Like I'm going to give you a time frame because then otherwise people are like, well, I'm never going to see him again. Like that. No, that's not the case. I just don't have the solution right now. And I need some time to come up with that. So even on a short time frame, I find that this is a thing that can be helpful.
Yep. The mode switching, I think, really is the
Yeah.
key there for
Yeah.
me. All right. The next one that I want to talk about is 61, freedom. And I have in the notes here freedom and goals because I feel like these are connected in how he talks about this chapter, but the chapter itself is just called freedom. He talks about how art is far more powerful than our plans for it. And on page 328, he says, in the creative process, it's often more difficult to accomplish a goal by aiming at it. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I feel like every time I've tried to create art in any form, whether it's writing, even technical things like this audio rack that I've been referring to, like I have a goal and I know what the outcome of that needs to be, and yet the way that I get there, or even like the final product, is already different than what I intended to hit. Like, and this is a very systematic mathematical process that you can go through to come up with how this thing needs to be built. And even that ended up being a creative process to change. So I think he's spot on here. Like, I don't think it's ever exactly what you intend to hit when you are done. There's always like something that's a little bit different than what you intended.
Yeah, and I bring this up because of goals, but I feel like this helps add some context to something I was having trouble articulating regarding my issue with goals. It's not the goals themselves, I think, that are bad. So Bodie Cork will be happy to hear, I guess, that I'm being a little bit nicer to goals. But the way that we traditionally set them as I'm going to achieve this outcome by this date, the whole SMART format, right? I feel like that's very different than what you just described, which is I have a general idea of what this thing should look like when it's functioning at the end.
Yes.
Right. And so I feel like that's fine to have some sort of picture of what the end product is going to be. But the more specific that you get in shaping that goal, I feel like if it is something that is creative, and I am more and more understanding that creativity and productivity are like two different sides of the same coin. So just like everybody is creative, everyone should care about their productivity. The productivity is how you are actually doing the work, but the creativity is how that work is being expressed. It's the thing that you're making as opposed to the stuff that you are doing. So I think there's a correlation there. And so this is something that everybody should consider, I think. And when you don't get so anchored to the specifics of a traditional goal, you do experience what he has titled this chapter, which is freedom. So it's fine to have those markers of like, this is what I want to have happen. But I guess this is a good argument for holding those things lightly and being willing to modify or even completely scrap your plans.
So it's interesting you brought this up. So one of the things I've been thinking about is like, okay, what are the technical reasons that goals are bad? Like, you know what I mean? Like, sure, we say that, and it's something that, like, I would definitely agree with that if you said it in that way, just a blanket statement, like very, very vague. But why? Why would I say that? And I don't have clean answers on that. Like, so don't expect some magical thing I'm about to tell you. That doesn't exist. But the derivative question that I've had as a result of that is, what's the alternative to goals? And something I've been processing is like, okay, take this audio rack. It's not that I'm trying to accomplish a goal. It's that there's a problem I'm trying to solve. And if I'm working towards solving that problem, inherently there is an obvious point in time when that problem has been solved. Now, there might be corresponding or cascading problems that arise as a result of solving that first one, because I've had that with our main sound system recently. It was like I fixed a certain thing with the amps, which then led to this whole like room tuning thing I had to do. I fixed one problem and it created 12 more. So it's just the way that stuff goes sometimes. Like, that's a problem that needs solved. Would some people call that a goal? Probably. So it starts to get a little bit vague. Anyway, the goal thing, you got me thinking on that. It's like, I wonder if it's more about, for me anyway, this is, again, not necessarily a hot take, but it's a thing that's still being processed. So it's not fully cooked. Just be aware of that. But this concept of problem solving versus setting goals.
Let me take a stab at it.
Okay.
So
hit me.
I think when you set a goal, what you are saying is, this is the thing I'm going to focus on, right? So you are converging your focus. You are eliminating options as you move towards a focal point. But on the other side of that, the freedom that he's talking about, and there are other chapters he talks about here where, like, when you are stuck in the middle of a project, you should just completely flip it around and do something totally crazy and see what happens with that. So that, I feel like the creativity side of this is divergence, where it's getting wider and you are getting more options. And if I were to summarize my thought on how do these two things relate right now, it is that we are constantly switching between converging and diverging. And so we're constantly switching back and forth from, for lack of a better term, productivity and creativity. I know that you can be productive as a creative, and I would argue that more people need to be creative when they are being productive. But I feel like there's just these two different mindsets that we have to switch back and forth from. And the better we get at changing our focus whenever it is appropriate, the better we become at overcoming the obstacles that are the true obstacles that are in front of us. And then you couple that with the idea of self-determination, and we have the ability to plot our own path. And it makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, still cooking on it a little bit, but I find that helpful anyways, of like, now's the time to look wider as opposed to now's the time to look narrower.
Sure. Thoughts of thoughts. There's another seed to put in the pot.
Exactly. All right. The next one is just a couple of chapters ahead, 63, What Works for You. And I feel like we have to touch on this one, given the nature of Bookworm, because there is so much advice that we process ourselves and then we talk about and people listen to. We would be derelict in our duties if we did not share the warning here that as you receive advice, you need to receive it as information, not a prescription. And part of me is just like, I've been kind of on this kick lately that productivity books, they tend to be written as, here's the system, and now all you have to do is work the system and you're guaranteed to get the results. And I've been telling people in the different talks and things that I've been doing recently, like, that's garbage. You have to evaluate for yourself what is actually there. Going all the way back again to How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. There's so much good stuff in that book. And he talks about how when you read a book, it's like playing catch, and the author is throwing the ball to you and you have to receive it. And if they are a skilled writer, skilled communicator, then they have more control. And then you receive the message and then you weigh it for yourself and you decide whether you agree or disagree with it. And you ask questions in return, right? That's a kind of weird picture for people who'd never heard that before, of actually having like a conversation with an author, but that you really have the right to do that. Weigh all these things and decide if it is right for you. It doesn't matter how many Grammys they've won. Doesn't matter how many books they have had on the New York Times bestsellers list, right? It may not be the right thing for you, especially in this moment. So this whole chapter is just about how your path is unique. There's no single route to great art, and there's no wrong way to make art. You have to figure it out for yourself. And I think what we're trying to do is share the things that we noticed and the results from our own experiments. There's a chapter in here on experimentation as well. And you can draw your own conclusions from that. Feel free to try it. You know, if I had a tennis coach in college who he would mix up his sayings all the time. And there was one time before a big match in the tournament at the end of the year. He's like, if the shoe fits, try it on and think about it. Right. So that's something we say all the time. And that really, really applies here. Try it on and think about it. Decide for yourself, though, if you decide this isn't the right thing, and feel free to take it off again.
I have been known to mix up sayings, and it's usually when I'm like doing quick critiques of my children is when this slips up. I don't intend to do this, but simple things like don't talk with food in your mouth, right? Like that concept, or the one that I've been accidentally saying lately when they're talking with food in their mouths is don't talk with your mouth open. Like, wait, no, that doesn't add up. So like those phrases will sometimes come out. It's like, it's not, what I meant. And of course, then they're dying laughing and spitting food everywhere. So like, the complete opposite of what I wanted. Being a dad.
All right. The last one here, if you're ready to move on to this one, is chapter 71, which is actually called The Art Habit. So another chapter on habits here, but the subtitle is Sangha. And that's the one that I think is a cool idea that I wanted to discuss. So in this chapter, there's a couple things which are not necessarily related that really resonated with me. Page 359, he says, if you look for the work to support you, you may be asking too much of it. That reminded me of that Derek Sivers essay about how to make a lot of money and do what you love, have a well-paying job, and make your art, right? That's kind of what he's talking about here.
Right. Do two things, not one.
Exactly. So success is harder to come by when your life depends on it. He talks about how it's okay to have a job that supports your art habit. However, the word Sangha, this is kind of like a mastermind. It's other people who have a creative mindset, but they don't have to be expressing their creativity the same way you do. And I think this is, so that's typically what I would describe as a mastermind group. I've got a blog post, which I wrote quite a while ago at this point, on how to start your own mastermind group, which I will put a link to in the show notes. I think that's still relevant. And really the takeaway, I think, at this point is just to realize the value in this and look for these kinds of people in your life. Because the big thing he talks about here is that creativity is contagious. And I 100% believe that. If you try to create in a vacuum, it can be really, really difficult. But when you are around other people who are doing the same thing, it becomes a lot easier. There's like this positive peer pressure. There's motivation that goes along with that. That's why things like Part-Time YouTuber Academy and Ship 30 for 30 are successful, because there's a whole bunch of people doing the same thing at the same time.
And yet they're different. Like that's part of the point, right? This is so personally, like this is something that I only just connected this when you started explaining it, but like I do so much stuff in the sound world and audio systems. That's a big part of my day job, it seems like. And yet that means that I'm not really around other sound engineers very often. I mean, from time to time, but the people that I am around a lot are musicians. And we're all working towards kind of the same thing, but it definitely is a creative process for creating that song, because I'm definitely a big part of that, because I'm putting like amplifying or de-amplifying or putting effects into the play. Like I'm adding a lot of that to it in order to create the sound that the band is after. So we're definitely doing this together. So there ends up being a lot of creative process collectively in that arena. But at the same time, like that doesn't really translate to podcasting or writing. Like it doesn't really translate into that realm. I think that's where maybe what you're talking about with the Part-Time YouTuber Academy. Like if you're doing something around YouTube, like that is definitely a place you should go, at least getting started, right? So that's kind of similar, but I think it is helpful to find these groups. You know, it can be super encouraging. Honestly, it can be a great source of accountability. If you're somebody like me that needs that type of thing, that can be huge. So please do this. It's good. It's good. It won't hurt you.
All right. Should we do action items?
Sure.
All right. I don't have any.
I'm the same.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
Well, let's talk about why that is, I think. Because this book is interesting. We'll get into style and rating in a minute. But I think the one action item that could be gleaned from this, I guess technically there's lots of little things that you could apply. But I think the obvious one is to reconsider your creative rhythms, your creative habits. And I intend to do that, but not with the intention of changing anything. What this book has done is it has helped me to look at the way that I create. And in a lot of ways, it's reinforced some of the beliefs that I have held and created more motivation to do things that I have been doing. It has spurred some ideas for other things that I want to do with things like the faith-based productivity community. But there was nothing in this that I've walked away like, oh, that is something specific that I am going to implement. And I feel like that is okay. That is not a judgment on this book in any way, shape, or form.
I think that's absolutely valid, because thinking about the fact that I have none, and then thinking about the creative endeavors that I'm involved in, which seem to be fairly extensive the more I process that, it helps me realize that either, one, I have a lot of good processes in place, and this is just a reaffirming book, or this is more just motivational. It's not necessarily, here's the tactics you need to employ. Rather, this is a, hey, you know what to do, go to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this isn't a, how to calm your mind. We had some very practical things that came out of that. This one is more like, hey, here's how this stuff works. I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, because he's even got a chapter in there that says, hey, just do what works for you. Don't listen to me.
Yeah.
He has that there. So that's definitely a thing that is at play. So it's something that I know it definitely can be something that can spur you to get to work.
Yep.
Like, that's, I think, what I'm getting at.
Yeah. The action item that comes from this from the very beginning is make art. And if you are making art, there's a lot of encouragement here, but it's not written in a way that there's like lots of different tweaks that you're going to make to your process. If you're not making art, I would think that would be a very strong action item. And art is whatever it is that is in your heart to create. All right. So that being said, let's go on to style and rating. And this is my book, so I will go first. I love this book. I mentioned in terms of the bookworm format, it felt very much like a choose your own adventure style book. And I feel a little bit selfish because all the stuff on the outline was mine. But
which is okay. I didn't give you anything.
That's
so
true.
Totally
I did ask.
That you did.
Yeah. I think everyone should pick this one up. I think this is probably the perfect book for what he was trying to do, honestly. The way it's laid out is just amazing. I feel like even the way he starts it with chapter 1, everyone is a creator. Like, it's very polarizing. You either agree with that or you don't agree with that. And as we talked about, by the time you get to chapter 10, if you don't agree with it, you're out. You've decided, I don't like this guy. However, for the people that this can really help, the people who this resonates with, I mean, I wish I would have had this at the beginning of my creative journey. I wish someone would have handed me this book when I was struggling with the idea of like, oh, I think I should write something, but I don't know what it should be. Because a lot of the things that he's talked about, I've struggled with this stuff. I feel like for anybody who thinks that they have the potential to be creative, this book can be very, very, very helpful. I also think that no two people are going to read this and walk away with the same pieces that really resonated with them, that really spoke to them. There's so much in here. There are so many one-liners, is how I called them, but just, it's really well written. The way things are written, I mean, this book could have been, I know it's 400 pages, but we talked about how it's not really that long because there's a lot of white space. This easily could have been 2 to 3 times this length. If this was written like most of the business and productivity books that we picked up, this would be over 1,000 pages. It feels very dense, very concise. You know, I picked this up and I started reading. It took me forever to get through this just because I walked out of every single chapter being like, I got to chew on that for a while. I read the first 5 chapters. I was at lunch like 2.5 weeks ago, and I got done. You know, I'm still sitting there eating lunch. I'm like, I got to close this. I got to think about what I just read. This is profound. This is potentially life-changing. So I think the audience maybe is going to be a little bit narrower than some of the stuff that we read. But I would argue that it shouldn't be, because going all the way back to chapter 1, I do believe everyone is creative. I think for anybody who is interested in the topic of creativity, there are 2 books. There's this one and The Laws of Creativity. That's it. They blow everything else that I have ever read on this topic out of the water. And this is something that I will definitely go back and reread at different points. I would have no trouble recommending this to anybody who listens to Bookworm, anyone who has a desire to make anything. And I think this is an easy 5 stars.
So Mike gives it 5 stars. I will not be. The thing that, so I think you're spot on. This book is amazing as far as like the creative process goes, because I don't think we've got a book. The Joey Cofone book is the one that's probably close, The Laws of Creativity. But this one covers like every component of creativity. There's not really a piece of the process that gets missed here. There's a little bit of weirdness when he gets into like some spiritual sides of things at times. That's very small portions. The part that is going to keep me off of the 5.0 here is just that, to me, this was a bit of a slog to get through.
Interesting.
And that might be a harsh way to say it. It was a difficult read for me, and it wasn't because of style. He has a really good writing style. He's a very dense writer, like you were saying. Like, I couldn't read this at lunch, and I couldn't read it at night. I had to read it in the morning. That was the only time I read this. And it was because like I would get through 2 or 3, maybe 4 of these chapters, and then it wasn't like I had to stop and say, okay, I got to chew on this. It was more like, okay, I just, like that whole vessel thing, like it was full. Like I couldn't do anymore. Like it was just too dense, and I couldn't take throwing more at myself. But I found it kind of difficult to get through, primarily because there's just no story here. Like, we've talked about that before, where, if you're going to get a point across really well, bringing story into it is a very big component of that. I don't know that he intended it that way, but there's just not much for the show me the climax of a plot line. Like that concept just doesn't exist here. I don't know that that's a requirement in a book, but having seen this one without that and without much for that. Now there are some, but they're like less than a paragraph, like a couple 3 sentences here and there, but not very often. Like I could probably count it on one hand, maybe 2, 6, 7 stories in the whole thing. Out of 400 pages, maybe there's more than that, and I'm just underestimating it. But it just didn't feel like but because of that, it meant that I had to actively work at trying to stay focused on what I was reading. That might be the ADD thing going on there. Maybe that's what's at play. It just felt like I had a hard time staying focused on the book, and it made it harder to get through. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just me, but because of that, I struggled with it. That said, having gone through it, it's an awesome book. I'm very grateful for having read it, so that I don't want to discount that as well. I just feel like there's a little bit of a shortcoming in some of the choice of style there that could have maybe helped some of these points to get them across a little bit better. Not to say he did a bad job, just better. Anyway, that's my opinion. So all that to say, I'm going to put it at a 4.5. It's very far up there. I just have that one complaint with it.
Well, let's put this one on the shelf. What is next, Joe?
Next is one I'm like super, super giddy about. The Future is Analog by David Sachs. This is a follow-up of sorts to The Revenge of Analog that he wrote that I read a few years ago. And I'm excited about this. Basically, we get to talk about analog stuff. We're going to have fun with this one, I think. I'm like itching to get into this. It'll be good.
All right.
So yes, The Future is Analog. And what is this book choice that you won't tell me about? You have to tell me now.
Well, I will tell you now. So this is a Bookworm Club recommendation by Martin, who I believe is still in the chat for the live recording. So thank you, Martin, for recommending this. Because this is a topic that has come up several times, and you're right. We should be reading a book on this. So we are going to read a book on motivation, and the book we are going to read is Susan Fowler's Master Your Motivation. And I'm putting the onus on this one squarely on you, Martin. You've recommended this multiple times now. I saw you just recommended it after the last episode and went back and read the original recommendation in the club. I feel like if you believe in something enough to recommend it that with that much space in between, this has got to be a pretty significant read. Because if you look for a motivation book on Amazon, good luck. But this one looks interesting. I don't have it yet. But yeah, 3 scientific truths for achieving your goals. Right there on the cover.
Science, truths, goals, motivation. Yep. Okay. I have very high expectations already.
Well, I'm going into it a little bit apprehensive, but I really do like the topic of motivation. We talked about that before on the show. And
yep,
I think if we get a good book on motivation, which this looks just as good as any of the other ones that I've seen, then it'll be a fun conversation at the very least. So there we go.
As Martin says, he's going into hiding. Okay. All right.
All right. Got any Gap books?
No, heavens no. This one took a lot. So no. I should have said that, yes, I was going to read something at the times I would normally read at night, but I was processing at that point, even though it was like 14 hours later. So no, I did not. But you? Anything?
I don't have anything selected yet. However, we leave for a family vacation for a week on Monday, assuming we don't get the 16 inches of forecasted snow. So
is the storm that we just went through still on its way to you?
No, we got that one, but there's another one coming.
Is that coming through me to you? I haven't looked at the weather.
Probably at some point. I don't know. Hopefully not.
Just got hammered. Yeah, so we're recording this on Friday. We would normally record it on Thursday. It's because I got hammered yesterday. Yes. Anyway. With snow, not in other ways.
Yeah. So hopefully on Monday I will be somewhere where there is no snow and no work responsibilities, and I will have a book that I will be reading as a Gap book, but I have not selected it yet. So
stay tuned.
I will report back. I will have one next time, but I don't know what it is yet.
Sounds good.
All right. So thank you to everyone who supports the podcast. Thank you to everyone who joined us for the live recording here today. And thank you especially to the Bookworm Club premium members. I would say go to bookworm.fm/membership and sign up, but we're in the middle of migrating things.
We'll make that link still work.
Okay. I know some people have had some issues signing up for things. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we're in the process of moving everything over to Circle, which is a much, I would say, more user-friendly interface, and hopefully won't have to bug Joe about everything
Right,
that goes
right.
wrong, because he's the only one who has the developer mind to fix it. If you do decide to support the show, what you get as a couple of perks, in addition to our undying gratitude, is the mind map files that I mentioned earlier. I put those in the club, and there is both a PDF version and also an editable MindNode version. MindNode is the application that I use to make them. So I make those available, do a dump every couple of months, and throw a bunch of new ones in there. There's also a bookworm wallpaper that I created a while back, some Gapbook episodes that Joe has recorded, and the new perk we mentioned at the beginning, the ad-free version of the show. We don't even have ads every episode yet, but as it grows, if those really bother you or you want to listen to it without the ads, then by being a paying member, you get access to a new feed. So just grab that feed, subscribe to that one in your podcatcher of choice. Keep the old one. We'll take the downloads.
Yeah, keep them both
But
in
then
your
you don't.
podcatcher. Yep.
But thank you to everyone who has supported the show.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback on that and say, pay attention to, if you're on the Discourse forum for the club, like just pay attention to that. I'm going to be posting some stuff as we work on this migration. So just be patient with us as we're doing that move, and you'll hear from us on what you need to do, if there's anything you need to do to help with that process. So thanks for your patience on that. That said, if you are one of these amazing people who reads along with us, because we know all of you do, you need to pick up The Future is Analog by David Sachs, and we'll cover that one with you in a couple of weeks.